Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Cybersecurity and the Anatomy of a Data Breach, presented by our sponsor, Heffernan. We're so happy you can join us. My name is Deb Beto, and I will be your moderator today and will be monitoring questions you may have during the session. Before we open up the session, let's review a couple of key items. All of the webinar materials we discussed can be found at the website currently showing on your screen, and I will be sharing this URL in a follow-up email, so don't feel like you need to write it down right now. If you have trouble with your internet connection during the webinar, we recommend leaving the presentation and logging back in. We do not control the audio. Your devices control the audio. So if you have audio difficulties, try adjusting the volume settings on your device. If a telephone line goes dead during the call, hang up and call back again to the same number. If all lines go dead, watch the on-screen chat box for an alternative call-in number. Please feel free to ask questions or provide feedback by using the chat box or questions box during the session. If you are using a tablet, you may need to tap on the screen for the options bar to appear, and then you can select the appropriate option. We may not respond immediately, but we will try to work your questions or feedback into the presentation. If we can't get to your comment or question during the session, we will be online afterwards to respond, or we may follow up in an email if we run completely out of time. You may also email us at moderator@aspenrmg.com for up to 48 hours after the webinar. This will be a 1-hour presentation. Questions and comments are very much encouraged throughout, and the presenter will be answering questions at the end. And lastly, we have a number of webinars upcoming covering a variety of topics, including those listed at the Heffernan webinar website. In addition, we offer the mandatory preventing harassment training in English 3 times a year. With that, let's begin today's Cybersecurity and the Anatomy of a Data Breach, presented by Eric Reed. Eric Reed is a CISA, CISM, CGEIT, and he began his IT career as a software developer programming punch cards on an IBM 370. Mr. Reed moved into network operations and later, as a network and security architect, provided the IT design and project management for many of the world's largest hotels and casinos. After which he provided IT audit services and managed Sarbanes-Oxley testing for a leading pharma. In 2005, Mr. Reed moved to United Healthcare, where he spent the next 10 years as Director of Audit, Risk Management, and Compliance. Since that time, he has consulted for companies including Honda North America, the Walt Disney Company, and Warner Brothers Warner Media. Mr. Reed teaches audit, security, governance, and risk classes and has participated as a member of the ISACA International CISMQAE Board, who reviews and approves potential certification test questions. Today, Mr. Reed works for a major fitness company providing oversight for testing of SOX, PCI DSS, CCPA, CPRA, GDPR, and related regulatory programs. So welcome, Eric Reed. I hope you tell us what some of those letters all mean. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to your presentation today.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate being here today, and thanks everyone for joining today. The letters are mostly created by organizations to make us feel impressed with ourselves, but I am certified as an auditor and as a security manager with globally accepted certifications. So let's get into the subject, cybersecurity and the anatomy of the data breach. We want to thank, first of all, the sponsors for helping us today and bringing everything to us. A couple things. One is I do work for a private company. I do not sell any product or sell consulting in this area. So any of the views or thoughts or opinions I'm going to talk about are mine. They're not any organization I've worked for, a committee, or any other group. And I'm not here to sell you anything at all. I'm just here to share some information. So if you have questions, if you can wait towards the end, that would be great. But I'm sure if it's important enough, they'll interrupt me and we'll move on. So let's talk about the discussion today. So we talk about a breach in an organization. An organization is probably using dozens of different tools and processes to manage a cyber incident. It's not a simple thing. But today we're going to make it simple. And I'm going to take a simplistic view, because if we were doing a deep dive, we would review several layers of net security, including multiple processes and tools, which are way too complex to get in for our time together. So I'm going to really take a look at firewalls and some basic tools and talk about how a breach works. And at the end of this, you should be able to reduce your risk of malware by 92%. That's a pretty impressive claim. If you do what we suggest in this presentation, you should reduce your risk by 92%. Okay? Hold me to that. So what is a data breach? We all know that data breaches are getting hit against government agencies, businesses, individuals, and they're increasingly common. Yet a lot of people still don't, still don't understand exactly what a data breach is. So we're going to define it. A data breach is any cyber incident in which the privacy of a data system has been compromised, causing an individual or organization to no longer have control over their data. Okay, it's very important. It's something where it's happened, where a data system has been compromised, and the organization no longer has 100% control over their data. So that's what we're going to go forward with. Sometimes we have an incident, and you hear about a breach, and if you have an incident as a data breach, it doesn't necessarily indicate that data has been sold or leaked outside parties, even though it's kind of a common occurrence in many data breaches. But it could be that someone got in and has yet to do bad things. And to be honest, a data breach does not have to be a cyber incident. An unplanned release of sensitive paper documents could be just as significant a data breach as a cyber breach. But today we are going to concentrate on the cyber breach area.
So did you want to do a polling question there?
I'm sorry, yes, please.
Okay, so we're going to do our first polling question. I'm going to launch it right now. Have you or your company ever been the victim of ransomware, computer virus, spyware, a worm, or other type of cyber attack? And I do like to make sure that we've got a chance for everyone to vote. I'll make sure that we've got 75 to 80% of the people voting before I go through the results. And again, if you have questions along the way, even though we're going to be answering questions at the end, please use your questions box to write your questions down, and then I will go through the questions at the end with Eric after I see what you've all written in your questions box. So we've got about 72% of the people that have voted. And Eric, 49% say yes, 16% say probably but not sure, and surprisingly, a whopping 36% say no.
That's not totally surprising, because a lot of attacks occur without the operators actually knowing they've been attacked. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. It's hard to understand today that if anyone wants in your system, and if they want in bad enough, they're going to get in. It's only a matter of time and effort. So these cyber things are going to affect everybody that's on this call and everybody that's not. So how is a computer compromised? How does this work? Okay, basically we're going to talk about the use of malware, malicious software, malware. Any program or file that's harmful to a computer user. I used to call early Microsoft Word malware because it seemed to blow up my computer every time, but that was 20 years ago. What we're talking about is malware which is designed to do damage. So we have 4 types of malware we really talk about: a computer virus, a worm, a Trojan horse, and spyware. So let's talk about these. A computer virus, it piggybacks on the legitimate application code in order to spread and reproduce itself. So let's say I have a little executable that allows me to open up an accounting package. The malware, once it gets in, it tries to attach itself to that executable. So that, yes, the accounting package will still open, but in addition, there could be some other type of occurrence happening. So by clicking the start my accounting program, I could be starting a whole chain of events. So computer virus is pretty serious. it does require a user action to initiate, so you have to click on something. Now, a worm's a little bit different. It can modify, delete files, and inject other malicious code. A worm travels through your network. It's self-replicating, does not require interaction. So once you have a worm, it starts moving through your network. A Trojan Horse, this is a type of malware which misleads the user of its true intent. And I'm going to use the example of a 1990s internet game we used to play a lot. It's called Whack-A-Mole. If you've ever been to a carnival and the Whack-A-Mole where the little mole pops up and you try to whack them with the little hammer thing and then they pop up in different places. Well, there was a really fun game called Whack-A-Mole and it was free on the internet. One of the first real internet games out there. It was awesome. We'd play for hours. What we didn't realize is when we opened it, it actually also downloaded malware. And it started looking at things and we were infecting our own machines by playing this game. There's many, many cases of Trojan horses out there now. And spyware. Spyware is one of the better ways that we have to maliciously attack. What it does is it collects types of actions. It sits there and spies on you. The one I like the best is called a keylogger. And it does exactly what it says. Every time you press a key, it logs that key. So after it fills up a buffer, then it shoots a message out to me. It says, from this user, here's the keystrokes. And I can see the emails that they've written. I can see the Word documents or Excel files. I can also look at login names and passwords because they're all keyboard. They're not encrypted, are they? So based on that, I can get a tremendous amount of information by using some malware. Okay, many attacks use a combination of these. Here's an example of a computer being infected. Okay, this is kind of an interesting one. This is a fake piece of malware. What it does is it likes to do this on your iPhones or your telephones, your computers. It'll come up with this and say, we've got these malicious viruses. If you call this telephone number right now, we'll help you get rid of them. There's no actual infection occurring right now except for this little pop-up that comes up and scares people. But what they do is they call people, and this person maybe charges them $299 to remote into their computer and fix whatever is occurring. Now, they will generally remove this piece of malware when they do that. They'll usually inject other malware, which is much worse. So not only are you paying to have something that's fake removed, you're paying to have someone else install worse malware on your actual computer or your phone. So this is a very, very effective way. You still have to have someone with a telephone to take the calls and to do some work. So there is some overhead for a hacker. And that's important to know because a lot of hackers, we think of some person sitting in a darkened closet with bright lights just on certain areas, and they got the beard and they're working hard and they're attacking. These are organizations doing this. This is an organization that actually created this. They had a call center. They had a group set up to take these calls. So malware and computer breaches, it's not that mom and pop thing anymore. This is big business doing this. Here's another piece that you get. This is a little more serious. This happened during a ransomware attack. So I'm going to talk about ransomware in just a minute. But in this case, you see they got a file here, and it says all your files are encrypted. It talks about the encrypted ciphers you use. And telling someone what cipher you use, like an AES-128 or RSA-2048, it can tell you a little bit, but if it's well encrypted, it doesn't tell you how to encrypt it in any way. So they just want you to know this is how it was encrypted, and there's some addresses you can use to get on their secret server and to receive your key so the ransomware is unlocked. But if you can't get in, they have a Tor browser, and Tor is part of the darknet. The darknet is a whole bunch of servers and network devices that we don't see using our DNS and using our HTTP. Basically, when I use my websites, when I use my web browser, a lot of things I can't see out there because it's hidden. And and darknet is one of those things. The darknet's where you can buy lists of people's credit card numbers, social security numbers, medical IDs. You can get just about anything on the darknet, and they've been stopped a couple times, but there's always another group popping back up. So this is a very serious type thing, because this means there's an encryption, you've been notified, and don't get me wrong, when you go into their secret server and try to get the key, they're going to want money, and a lot of it. So let's talk about really how the whole thing is.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. You wanted to do a polling question there.
I am so sorry. I get so excited about talking this, I just keep going. Yes, please. Thank you for interrupting.
Sure. So our polling question, what do you use to protect your computer from cyber attacks? So you can choose more than one answer here. And our choices are email security management system, firewall, antivirus software, awareness campaigns, or you're not sure. So again, take a few minutes to, not a few minutes, just take a moment, because we're gonna, as soon as we've got about 75% of the people responding, I will let Eric know what the responses are, since he can't see the responses. And we've got a really good voting record on this one, Eric, over 80% already. So 73% say email security management systems, 90% have firewalls, 87% have antivirus software, 51% say awareness campaigns, and 5% are not sure.
That's a really, really interesting numbers. And let's remember those for later, because those are going to come back to haunt us, I think. So let's talk about how a firewall works. 90% of the people say they have them. Probably I would be surprised if more than that didn't have them. But a firewall is really your main protection between your external bad world and your internal trusted network. Here we see a firewall, and all it's supposed to do is prohibit traffic from untrusted networks unless it's been approved. So how do you get someone to approve, say, let's say Amazon, you want to go shopping. Well, if Amazon sends you a message to the firewall is going to reject it. It will not allow it in. You have to start by saying, Amazon, I'm interested in something. So on the left, you see the secure, trusted, the good guys, that's us. And we're going to send a message out. Basically, it's a browser message through the firewall to, we'll say, Microsoft.com in this case. They're on the public internet, but we consider them trusted. When that's made, now it goes through the firewall. You'll notice it says a stateful firewall. That means it tracks things. It tracks requests that go out, and it tries to match them up with items hitting the firewall on the outside. For example, here we have a blue line. And the blue line is Microsoft.com responding to my request. Now, the stateful firewall says, oh yeah, you send a message out to this site, and they send a reply back, and everything seems to match, so I'm going to let it through. And I'm going to open what we call a session. So now there's a session between my computer and Microsoft.com. And as long as I use that, I have the ability to go back and forth through the firewall. So now I can go from trusted to untrusted, and untrusted back, because it's a place I do trust. If you'll notice, there's sometimes you'll have software on your computer, and when you try to go to a different site, it'll warn you. It'll warn you it may be a bad site. Well, that's because their servers, whoever created the software, are saying there's bad people behind those other sites. You have to make sure you really want to go there. So you can get protected against going to bad sites, but Microsoft is an example. The perfect example is whitehouse.gov. Whitehouse.gov is the White House in Washington, D.C., where the President of the United States lives. Whitehouse.com is a pornographic site. So you wouldn't want to necessarily mix those up, especially if you're a teacher. But in this case, you can see we went out, we came back. You'll also notice we have some public internet bad guys out there, and they're all throwing stuff at the firewall. They're trying to get through. And they don't get through because there was nothing to initiate the session. There was no request that went out to them that they could reply back in. Now, again, this is very, very simplified. I'm talking about things coming through a firewall, and there's 100 other ways to attack, but this is 99.99% of how bad things get into your network. It's through the firewall itself. So if we're going to be bad guys, we got to start thinking like a bad guy. So how can I get the trusted network person to send requests to my bad guy site? Because if he doesn't send a request through that firewall, I can't respond and send things back. So phishing is a big thing. We have phishing, we have spear phishing, we have whale phishing, or it's called whaling. We have click-on-me's, and we have social engineering. So these are all email. Now, emails are really important because they let me get into individuals. I can target people with an email. So what I would do is I would send a targeted set of emails to the trusted network to try to get somebody to click on a button, a banner, or something. And that click on me, the banner, the button, will cause a request to be sent from inside your computer to my bad guy site. So when my bad guy sites respond, the firewall will allow it through. So the whole idea here is to get you to respond to something so that I have an opening in the firewall. So for email, for phishing, phishing is really a fraudulent attempt to obtain sensitive information or data such as usernames, passwords, credit card details, or other sensitive details by impersonating oneself as a trustworthy entity in a digital communication. We've seen everything from Nigerian Scam, which is where a Nigerian prince has somehow gotten in disfavor with the government. He has $500 million, but he needs someone to help him bring that money into the United States. So he'll pay you 3% if you'll give him all your bank information. These types of things are incredibly successful. I actually had a relative of mine, who's since passed away, who actually lost his life savings and embezzled several $100,000 from where he worked. When he was caught, he said, "It's okay. I'm on the cusp of getting almost $100 million. He actually believed it. And what they do, they strung him out over about 3 years, each time wanting a few more dollars for processing, this and that. And phishing works. These types of things are very successful. Spear phishing. Spear phishing is attempts directed at specific individuals or specific companies, a little more directed. Whaling is where you're looking at senior executives or other high-profile targets. It can be, you can try to get the president of the United States. You can try to get a president of a company or someone who might have more access. And then click on me's kind of that enticing, something enticing to get them to click on a malware link. I told you about whack-a-mole. That was a click on me. Click on this, you get a free game. Click on this and you get a $20 Walmart card. I see those all the time in my email. Or I'm a winner, or I have money the government wants to give me. I just need to click here to get the information. You see this all the time. And where it's interesting, the sites that are less likely to be parts of a chamber of commerce are really likely places to pick up this type of malware. Pornographic sites, betting sites, online pharmacy sites, they're all where a lot of this stuff sits. But they can also sit in other networks, and we'll see how that works. So these are everywhere. So again, we want to entice someone to click on something. And then we also have a different type of hack. And we're only going to talk a minute about this. This is the supply chain hack. I think you probably know about the solar winds last year and Microsoft Exchange this year. We're going to talk about that in the very end. And I don't want to confuse us with our regular hacks, but that's something we do need to talk about in the presentation. So let's move on to now the bad guy. The bad guy's got you to click on something.
Eric,
Okay?
I'm sorry to interrupt again. You wanted to do a polling question there.
I am so sorry. Yes, please.
All right. So this one is another multiple choice. You can say multiple answers here. Does your company have data that you are legally required to protect, like credit cards, Social Security, or health-related data? So the first type would be privacy, like social security number, birth date, driver's license. The second one would be regulatory, like HIPAA, SOX, CCPA, or GDPR. The third one is credit card data, PCS, DSS. The fourth one is just your own business confidential information. And if you're not sure if you have any of these, then that's an option as well. But we'd like to kind of get an idea of what types of information the audience is trying to protect. And Eric, we have 84% say privacy, 51% say regulatory, 37% credit card, and 84% business confidential information.
Yeah, that'd be about right. That's a lot of really, really resaleable data there. So let's talk about that. We'll get into that in just a minute, because this all fits right into what we're talking about now. We have an attacker. We've clicked on something, and now they're in. I clicked on a whack-a-mole. They've sent back, and I didn't know when they sent back a reply that now I have some code in. So what's the first thing I'm going to do? Well, I'm going to take a look at a hack I witnessed at a service company I was working for a few years ago. It started as a whale fishing expedition, and it worked as the director of HR responded to the whale fish. They wanted this person to respond, and they did. So the next step they do is they download additional code. Using the ability to create the firewall session, they started additional downloads, and that provided the hacker ability. The bad guy installed a keylogger, and over a few weeks, even a few months, this keylogger started collecting all kinds of information. And it was information about passwords and logins, and somebody that didn't like in an email to someone else. It got pretty ugly there. So they've collected this, and they're doing reconnaissance now. And their reconnaissance really starts to search the trusted network. It provides mapping and other data to the bad guy. They may want to wait, like say, weeks or months to take a look. Now, if we look at the Sony hack about 5-6 years ago, they were in that network for months before Sony ever knew about it. So just because you don't have an attack happening right now doesn't mean bad guys aren't in your network performing surveillance right now. So once they finish the reconnaissance, they're going to do an analysis. What data exists, and what's the strategy to monetize? And that's what we talk about. What we just explained is you have a company call it confidential. You have credit card information. You have privacy information, and you have regulatory information, which will tell you a lot about the organization. So lots of things that we can monetize, and we still have to decide how we're going to monetize this little attack here. And then the next thing we're going to do is, once we kind of decide how we're going to monetize it, we start turning certain systems off. In this case, payroll was using a self-service portal for employees. And part of that allows the employees to change the direct deposit accounts. Problem is, every time I make a change to my payroll, I get an email saying, I just made a change. If it's not, check with HR. If it's okay, you can delete this email. So as a bad guy, the first thing they did is they created a rule in the email system that any payroll emails to staff would automatically be placed in spam folders. Spam folders is pretty important because that's where the stuff we believe is fake is going. So what a perfect place to put these messages, because you think, oh, it's my spam folder. I'm sure glad that didn't come up on my regular screen. I might have done something. In this case, it would have been helpful. But now, this bad guy's in. Let's go over it. They've downloaded some additional code. They put a keylogger in. They've done reconnaissance. They've done analysis. And they've turned off systems that would allow us to monitor them. So the next step is the attack. So we're going to talk about the phishing attack first. First thing I'm going to do is start exfiltrating data that is useful to the bad guy. This could be emails, secure files, things like that. Anything that can embarrass or provide confidential data to the world. It can also identify other phishing targets or even whales. So then I've got this data and I've got all this fun stuff. Let's monetize the attack. I go in and I start making direct deposit changes for each employee. And what I do is for each employee, I get a green dot card. Now, a green dot card, you can see at any grocery store. And I'm using them as an example. There's been 2 or 3 hacks where their product has been involved. I'm not saying they're responsible for this, but this is a very interesting way to do this. Green dot cards you can get at the grocery store. And they're refillable, branded cards. They say Visa or MasterCard or something like that. And I can then put $50 on it at the grocery checkout, and I have a card with $50 on it. I can use that like any ATM or even a credit card in most cases. And for people that don't have access to credit or to bank accounts, that can be a very useful thing. But it's also kind of anonymous. Now, when I use this card, I have to go home and put all my information online. But who says it's my real information? So the green dot card can be totally anonymous. So if I've got 400 accounts I want to move my money over to, I get 400 green dot cards. And one by one, I make the direct deposit changes to the green dot card rather than to the customer. Okay, so now the employees, their payroll is now going to me on these green dot cards. Did I jump on there? Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. So the results. Let's talk about what happened. Over $200,000 was spent reimbursing employees for payroll that was lost. This also includes not only the paycheck, but any bank fees that they incurred. They spent over $50,000 for forensics to ensure no sleeper code had been introduced in the network that wasn't currently active. The $50,000 was well spent, but it doesn't mean they are sure that all the sleeper code is out. While those people were in, they could have been code that only comes out and talks to us a year from now. They paid for 2 years credit monitoring for every employee. They made every account password change mandatory, and they monitored the dark web to determine if account numbers or other private information was being promoted for sale. This was something that just happened over a weekend, a payday, and when people came back, they were really, really unhappy. There was no money in their accounts. And it took these folks a full day to figure out what had happened before they could even stop money going to these green dot cards. And most of the green dot cards got fulfilled. What happened to those green dot cards? They could have been distributed to the bad guys. In many cases, they're sent overseas as part of an organized crime venture, and they're used to promote all kinds of badness. But this is a way this actually happened, and this is why these phishing attacks can be so effective and so dangerous. So let's talk a little differently. Let's talk about ransomware. Step one, same thing. Begin exfiltrating data, or exfiltrating, just sending it out. That's useful to the bad guy. Then I'm going to monetize the hack. In this case, I'm going to encrypt the files. And after I encrypt the files, I'm going to notify the owners. Because if they don't know it's encrypted and why it's not working, they won't know that they need to pay me. So I notify the owners and I demand the ransom. When I get the ransom money, generally I'm going to ask for cryptocurrency because it's almost impossible to trace. So that gives me the anonymity necessary for me to continue to be a bad guy. In return, I'm going to provide the encryption keys back to the organization that paid me, or maybe I won't. What we're finding now is more and more when the subjects pay the ransom, the keys they get back do not de-encrypt all the data. And when we talk about encrypt the data, let's talk about encrypted files. We're not just putting a level of security in, we're encrypting everything that they can no longer get into it. Let's say they got a database. I can encrypt the database, so without my key, you can't read anything. And if you have encryption in it, I've just encrypted over the top of your encryption. You still can't get into it. I can make it so you can't use anything. In the case of the Sony hack, they got into the system. They were everywhere. They shut down the telephone system, which is part of their IP system. It was their phones over their internet. They shut down the telephones. They shut down all the database servers, to shut down all the processing. For the next few months, Sony actually ran a studio using blackboards, typewriters, paper, and their cell phones. I mean, that is a significant lift. Many companies would never be able to survive that time that they had the problem. So the last part of this is when I'm the bad guy, I'm not giving the encryption keys back, still doesn't mean I'm not going to sell or public release the collected data that I exfiltrated. Just because you paid me doesn't mean I'm a good person. I may think it's funny, or I may be able to make some money off it. So that ransomware attack is really very, very vicious, and it's a scary thing. But how did we get here? The question is, we seem to be secure a few years ago. What happened? So if we go back a couple years, let's go back to the traditional attack surfaces, okay? This is every company basically had some type of firewall for internet access. They had a VPN for remote access, and email. And then there's one other thing called SneakerNet. You know those little thumb drives you walk around the office and you say, hey, Bill, I need to share this file. I'll just give you the thumb drive. That's SneakerNet. You're taking things and walking it around. That is as sure a way to spread a virus as any electronic means, because who knows what's on that thumb drive. So here we have 4 vectors to come in and attack. And so it was the same 4 vectors. You could really beef up these 4. Well, let's now take a look at last year. Last year, a lot of things changed in that we started to have third-party vendors. They were in the cloud or they're external. We have the firewall, the VPN, and the email still going to the internet. That's the same. I got maybe 8, 10, 20 third-party vendors. I've also got cloud service now. I've got AWS, I've got Azure, maybe Salesforce or something like that, maybe Splunk. There's tools out there, and all these things are in the cloud. And I also have something else called shadow IT. And shadow IT happens when the staff of a company gets a little disgusted with IT and says they're just not moving fast enough, or they're not doing what I need them to do. So Bill over in accounting, he's got 2 new people coming in, and IT hadn't really helped with the networking, so he just bought himself a little wireless router, plugged it in, and had them go on wireless, and hey, they're on the network now. They're fine. They probably don't have any of the security functions turned on that need to be turned on to protect the network. So if I'm outside with my wireless computer, I might be able to hack right in there and get right into your network through the shadow IT. Happens all the time. So now we went from about 4 attack surfaces to 18 attack surfaces. Okay, the vendor stuff, we have third-party vendor practices, we have cloud practices, we try to limit shadow IT. We can still manage this. But then one other thing happened, and that's the work at home. The work from home that we've had for the last year has just made this crazy. I still have the 4 or the 3 main attack surfaces. I have the third-party vendors, I got a shadow IT, and I've got my cloud, but now I've got all my work from home people out there. And each one of these is going to come in either through the internet or through email or to one of the cloud directly. Maybe they don't have to come through our network to get to our cloud, Salesforce or into our AWS instance. So now, instead of 18 attack surfaces, we have hundreds of attack surfaces. Now, the other thing is, those computers sitting at home, they might be their home computers, they might be your corporate computers. If they're your corporate computers, I hopefully have enforced certain policies and rules that antivirus is on it. It can only be used for certain things to make it a little safer. The home computer is a complete wild card. We don't know what's on it. We don't know who uses it. We don't know if there's viruses on it. It's a scary thing. But let's say a little Billy comes home and you got your corporate computer out, and he's come home from playing with his friends and wants to get on the Lego site and says, hey, there's a computer, and jumps on. Well, he hits a couple of wrong keys and he goes to a site that downloads something. You'd never know. It can happen anytime, any day. And now we've got these hundreds, and this is for a small organization, hundreds of these attack surfaces. It's very, very hard to actually be able to protect yourself from this type of danger. So what are the numbers? The numbers are 92% of malware is delivered by email. 43% of breach victims are small and medium businesses. Supply chain attacks are up, and we'll talk about in a couple minutes, a little bit different. Almost 70% of the organizations don't believe their threats they're seeing can be blocked by their antivirus software. And the average cost of a ransomware attack on a business is about $133,000. That's 70%. That's 69% of organizations. That's really telling, and it's probably very, very accurate. Your software that protects your email systems, it can be very, very good at what it does, but it can't stop everything. A lot of the stuff is coming through, this bad email stuff is coming through, and they're watching what these tools do, and they go right around it. They're always one step ahead because they create new types of technology to get through and to fool that email security system before we can stop it. We don't know it's coming until that 0 day. So the anti-malware software for email is good, but it won't stop everything. That 92% comes through email, doesn't really surprise. If you're going to target someone, that's the best way to do it. So let's take a look here and say, how do we protect ourselves? And what we first need to determine what we have that would merit attack. What are your organization's greatest assets? People, obviously people. Data that can be used or sold. That's your critical information data. A lot of you talked about that. Embarrassing or compromising emails. We saw a bunch of embarrassing emails come up from Sony executives after that breach. And that was just done to hurt people. PII, personally identifiable information. A lot of PII can be sold on the darknet. Personal health information, that can be very useful. Business cash accounts, access to accounts and payables, and access to other networks. If you have interfaces with other networks, say your third-party providers, that means they have access to you. That means if something bad happens here, it might be able to jump over into your other network, your competitor's network, or your supplier's network. So that's a pretty scary thing. And of course, the employee information you have there, those direct deposit changes, we saw everything there, and access to their home computers. That can give us a world of new targets to go after. So let's go into the next question. And I remembered the question this time.
That's excellent. Thank you, Eric. So let me launch that question. This will be our last polling question, so you won't have to remember another one. But we do have some good questions coming in from the audience, so we'll look forward to those. So our polling question, are your employees trained for preventing and responding to cyber attacks? Our choices are yes, we have continuous training. Yes, but just as I mentioned once, I think there's somebody that handles this in my office. No, or I don't know. So these are your choices. And again, please send us your questions along the way, and we will queue them up at the end unless Eric happens to touch on them during his presentation, just in the natural course of things. So we will have time for questions at the end, so make sure you send those to us. So Eric, we have 32% say yes, continuous training. I'm very impressed with that. 34% say yes, but just as I mentioned once. 2% say, I think there's somebody that handles that in my office. 22% unfortunately say no, and 10% don't know.
Well, that's actually that's a pretty fair number. That's kind of what we'd expected to trend at. So when we talk about protecting ourselves, and we see the ways that we talk about protecting ourselves, we talk about our training. But first of all, obviously the firewall. The antivirus software becomes very, very important. Email security management, most of you have that, that's good. Network security processes we have in place. Those are all good. But the way to protect yourself from cyber criminals, awareness training. 92% of malware is delivered via email. If we could have better awareness training, we could drop that 92% down, way, way down as a threat. 97% of users, according to Intel, cannot identify a sophisticated phishing email. There's been a couple that I missed. They were so good. Proactive training significantly helps users learn to recognize and avoid cyber attacks. I've done a couple things. Yeah, we do the fake phishing attacks and see who replies. And what we try to do is the people that don't make the mistake on it, we enter their name into a little drawing and we give away a little thing each month as the best cyber sleuth for the office. I find little rewards are really important. For this, I do a couple things. About once a month, I'll drop 1 or 2 thumb drives in the parking lot. And, a thumb drive, it's not expensive. They're little memory chips, right? But people love them. And so they run back and they want to see whose it is or what happens. They plug it into their computer. And instead of a virus attacking them, a little screen comes up saying, please contact Eric Reed. He needs his thumb drive back. And we do explain to them, we really shouldn't do things like that. We shouldn't plug things in we don't know. And that's actually pretty effective. We then sanitize the thumb drive and give it to them and say, use this one, but don't use another one from the street. And it gets around. People think that it's funny, it's hilarious, so-and-so had this, but it's a really good learning experience. It helps people to understand what not to do. Same with these fake phishing attacks. You got to be careful because you've got to make it fun. Because when it stops being fun, people stop paying attention. So that awareness training all the time, the annual classes, monthly refreshers, the fake phishing emails, thumb drives in the parking, all these are very, very useful. It's something we have to remind someone all the time. A couple years ago, I was doing a security assessment for an organization, and they had 4 or 5 divisions. And one of the questions I asked was, I went out and interviewed people from each of the groups, not leaders, but regular workers. And I said, if there was a malware attack, if you knew or suspected there was a malware attack, who would you contact? And of 10 of them, 8 of them didn't have a clue. One of them said, yeah, I had training that a year ago. I just can't quite remember. And one said, I talked to my manager, which is not a bad response. So I failed these 4 divisions. And the 4 divisions came back and said, no, we have our policies and we have our standards, and they all have really well-defined processes to use. And they did. It was really wonderful what they had in policies and the standards. But if no one knows the policy or standards there, what value is it? And since none of these employees were able to point to that, I had to explain to them, the only way you're going to get past this gap is with an awareness campaign. You can have all the programs you want. If people don't know about them, they're not going to comply. So let's talk about supply chain attacks for just a minute, okay? Now this is absolutely fascinating to me. It's something that we were terrified of for years, but we've never seen it really happen. It's a totally different type of threat. The supply chain is generally a trusted group. It could be the person that handles your credit card processing. It could be someone that maybe you use reference. It could be a security vendor. The supply chain has to be trusted to some extent. SolarWinds is a good example. SolarWinds is probably one of the most respected names in managed security. They're considered a premier supplier for organizations around the world. And if you think SolarWinds, you think trusted. They've been used by CIA, FBI, DoD, State Department, Microsoft, most of the Fortune 500. I mean, they're just everywhere. So they're a supply chain provider. What they've been doing is they've been providing network services, network security services as a service to all these organizations, both government and non-governmental. If you wanted to know that your system was safe, you'd put one of their sensors in, and they'd be able to tell you exactly what kinds of traffic. It gave you everything you could need to know. So what happened? They got hacked. They got hacked big time. The bad guys were able to get past the SolarWinds security without SolarWinds ever knowing. the bad guys were able to insert code into the SolarWinds patch system. Now, every computer system has patches that come out from time to time. I think Microsoft has a second Tuesday of every month is their Patch Tuesday. Generally, there's monthly, and sometimes there's more often patches for emergencies. I think a good example for Microsoft was their email servers that got compromised. So they had an emergency patch on that. But patches come out, and we assume if a patch comes from Microsoft, then it's going to be a trusted patch, just like a patch coming from SolarWinds to patch their product, which could give us bug fixes, it could have new features, it could just be more efficient, any number of things. So when these bad guys got into the patch system, they inserted their own code into the patches. Now it's not a matter of going out and infecting companies, it's a matter of SolarWinds is going to infect all these companies for you. When they send the patches out and they get installed, each one of those has a little ability to go out and say, through the firewall, go to this IP address, say, I'm here. Once I get that, I reply to it, and now because the firewall has an open session, it allows me in, I can start doing my work. So now that, like I said, the SolarWinds patch is sent out, includes a secret code, the bad guys now have access to any organization that used the SolarWinds product. Just as an example, I know thousands of companies got hit, but Microsoft got hit so hard with the SolarWinds patch, they found that some of the Microsoft source code for their products had been altered by these hackers. So that any Microsoft patches came out would also be infected. Microsoft caught it. They've got an amazing security program there. And they were able to catch it because they look for things like this. But most companies that got hit still may not know that they are now vulnerable to this bad guy. That's how the SolarWinds things happened. If you talk about Microsoft Exchange Server, they found a bug in there, and I think they found it because these guys from the SolarWinds hack found it, and it led them to it. It was for the on-premise servers only, so if you're using 365, it doesn't impact you. If you're using Microsoft Exchange or Microsoft Mail Server on-premise, you need to get the patches yesterday. It is so serious, Microsoft saying don't do anything before you get these patches in. So the stuff's out there. We can see the supply chain hacks are really kind of terrifying. When we look at how the CISOs around the country view this, the impact of the breach is profound. It really turned its head on a lot of conventions about cybersecurity. I don't think the threat has been exaggerated in the media. Another answer was we're now in a situation where we have to monitor the monitors, the trusted people. This attack didn't have any signatures of a previous attack, so you got down to the code level. And 80 and 90% of that code is being downloaded from the internet. Bring DevOps security processes and making us rethink how to reinvent security. So all these things, these are terrifying statements. CISOs are generally pretty soft-spoken people. They don't try to get their hair on fire or try to get people too excited. But in this case, it's a pretty serious issue. So how do we stop this? We're still trying to figure that out. We're going to be working on that for a while. So I want to wrap this up so you can have some questions. Obviously, malware cyber attacks are increasing. Monetization has raised the bar for these crimes. New threats are there every day. And the best way to reduce this threat is through awareness training. I hate to say it. I'm a high-tech guy. I love my toys, my tools. But awareness training is the best thing you can do to make this less of a threat. Okay, let's talk about questions.
All right, Eric. So we have a general question. That started out as a specific question, but it turned into a general question. Can you give us some cell phone data adequate when it comes to breaches? So the specific question was, when some sites ask for a cell phone number to send a verification code as part of a multi-verification process, that feels a little bit uncomfortable, like they're going to use our cell phones for other malicious purposes. Can you talk about cell phone safety just in general for a minute?
Cell phone safety would be a whole nother discussion topic, because there's so many things. A couple things to remember. The third party, or I'm sorry, the two-factor identification. It's like I get a note from a tool that asks me. I think I use Okta, and Okta sends me a thing on my phone saying it was requested. I have to say yes on my phone. Gives me a second factor, so it's not just me. I have to have my phone with me too, and my password to my phone. Anytime you get a message that you're not expecting, you should never open it. Doesn't matter if it's a phone or a cell phone. In this case, Okta has you install an application, and you know it's coming from Okta, or at least that's the indication. But as connected as we are, people are going to hit things. So I wouldn't say how you can prevent things. I would say how can we recover quickly, because it's going to happen. You're going to get hacked at some point.
Okay. And do you recommend any of the things, the security, like Carbonite or any of those services that say they're going to protect your data, that you would be able to recover your data after a breach?
And I guess I'm not sure. In the case of a ransom attack, generally they don't just have the data that you're using today is being encrypted. It's probably, if it's been there for months, it's probably in your backup tapes. It's probably in your backup system, so that when you restore it, it gets back encrypted again. It's a difficult thing. I think some companies are getting better at that. I don't have any companies I would recommend, but I would say, again, I don't sell products. I don't recommend products. I do the work every day, and so I don't want to be pushing one side or another. Right. But you just have to be very careful. I'm not convinced that's the secure way to go at today.
Okay, and when I do get a ransomware, like somebody demanding cryptocurrency because they've, seen me on my camera, whatever, and I report that to an agency called ICANN, but it doesn't seem like anything ever happens with that information. Do you know anything about the ICANN organization?
Yeah, ICANN used to be a U.S. quasi-government organization. It's now an international organization. It was turned over. They collect a lot of information. They're not real good on takedowns. I've worked with content protection folks at the studios, and when they have things that come across that are bad, they can get a takedown. They can get that site completely shut down, but that takes a lot of work, and there's a lot of background legal work and things like that.
Right.
Your best bet is, yes, report them. It doesn't hurt, but get to your computer professional. Don't touch the computer. Let them look at it. Let them make a decision on the best way forward. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it'll be a fake ransomware. You can just get rid of the message, everything's fine. Other times you're locked up. You have to make a decision. If I give them the money and get the information back, is the benefit ratio right? But the other half is, if I give them the money and don't get anything and still have my data encrypted, is that benefit ratio still work out? Is it worth the chance? And that's what you got to have.
Right. Do you recommend a provider of user training for very small organizations?
I do. I recommend everyone get a trainer. I would never recommend an individual company, but there are some very, very good online training companies. There are some products that go out there and will create the fake phishing emails. I will mention one company, and I think it's funny. It's called CB4. And it's with a C, not a SED. Mm-hmm. And it's actually started by one of the most notorious hackers in the world, Kevin Mitnick. And he was one of the first phone hackers back in the early days. He went to prison for a number of years, and he can't do computer work, but he can do this awareness. So he's actually developed a pretty decent awareness package. But again, you're working with someone who was a significant hacker, so there's always risk there. But there's some really good products. I would make sure that you have a constant type of barrage of campaigns occurring, so that people remember to keep seeing them. out of sight, out of mind is a danger to us.
Okay. And one user requested, do you know anything about the company Knowbe4, Knowbe, and then the number 4?
I'm sorry, I lied. That's actually the company I was talking about. It's not C4,
Okay.
it's Knowbe4. And that's, like I said, owned by Kevin Mitnick. I've used them, and their products for awareness are very adequate. I had known Kevin many years ago, and I'm just happy to see he's back on his feet. And the product pretty strong. There are other competitors which may be just as good, but whichever one you use, you really need to have that process in place.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you for attending today's webinar presented by Heffernan. We will send information by email with instructions on how to access a copy of the presentation on our website. And thank you, Eric Reed, for your time and expertise today. We hope all of the attendees on today's webinar found this to be a valuable use of your time. And be sure to join us on April 20th for OSHA updates. So thank you, everyone, and have a very safe day.
Thank you now.